Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kelly Beard, Content Specialist for Maryland Realtors, and I want to welcome you all to the Meet the President webinar. Today, we have with us CEO Chuck Kasky and our newly installed 2024 Maryland Realtors President, Chris Hill. You'll get to learn a little bit about Chris, his initiatives for 2024, and what he wants all realtors to drive home this year. This webinar will be recorded and sent out to all attendees after the conclusion. We do encourage your questions, and we look forward to answering them as we go. Please post all your questions in the Q&A box below at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And with that, I turn it over to Chuck and Chris.
Thank you, Kelly. And as always, thanks. That's Kelly Beard, everybody, our webinar producer extraordinaire. So thank you so much. I am watching the attendee list grow. Some of you might have missed the very beginning of the introduction. So just be aware that, again, the webinar will be recorded, and please put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to them as we go. When a question does about something we're talking about, let's do that in real time. Don't save them to the end. We'll stop and we will have that conversation. We'll answer your questions and have hopefully a great interactive back and forth. So the joining has slowed, so I think we'll get started. Again, Chris Hill, 2024 Maryland Realtors President. Today's what's today's date? The 19th.
What is it?
The 19th day of your term. Tell us a little bit about your origin story. I always find it fascinating where you came from. We have a lot of our members obviously have been realtors their entire working lives, but we certainly have a lot of people who did other things first and then came to real estate license and became realtors later on in life. Some people are doing both at the same time. As we know, we have dual career agents, some of whom are quite successful, of course. So tell us your origin story and how you came not only to become a real estate licensee but ultimately to join and realtor associations and to start volunteering and all those things that led you to the pinnacle of your career being Maryland Realtors President.
I love that. That's funny. Well, first, let me take a second and thank everybody for checking it out. I appreciate it, and I'm humbled by all the positive stuff that I'm hearing, and it's actually very cool. It's funny how I hear everybody's story is a little bit different, right? Mine is very different, I would believe. I actually started in new home construction right out of high school and started working as a laborer. I was sweeping floors. That's what I did, and worked my way up through the home building business and worked for several large builders over the 80s, early 90s, and finally, I guess I got to the point where I was superintendent on several job sites, and I worked for a lot of builders. And then I decided to start my own home building company. It looked easy, right? After I worked for so many people, it looked easy. Little did I know it wasn't as easy, but that's a different story. I'll share that on another podcast or another webinar somewhere else. But no, actually, if everybody remembers, there was a time where the legislature required builders the sales representatives for builders to be licensed agents. And when that happened, I wanted to represent myself because I was selling my own homes. So I decided to get my real estate license at that time. And what I realized then was I was better at selling houses than I was at building them. Just to be honest, it was, and I was also more passionate about it. I think that was the key, right? It's what you're passionate about. And then very quickly, I discovered that real estate was a passion for me, helping people buy and sell homes and, get their first time homes, get out of their last home. And it became a true passion of mine, honestly.
So that, yeah,
And
and
then,
that's a great story. Anybody wants to know, we talk about the sausage factory, right? So the old saying about laws being like sausage, if you like them, it's best not to watch it made. That
right,
that bill that lasted for exactly 1 year was
right,
one of the prime examples of the sausage factory. I mean, it was a mistake, literally a mistake.
right.
And but it did disrupt the industry for a hot second. And now, of course, the new home registration units in the Attorney General's office reluctantly took that. But so then you got your license, and then you got out of home buildings. Then what?
Well, it was funny. It didn't take me long to realize that, as I was helping, people, it was funny. The real story was, I was having more success. People would come into my model home and say, "Oh, I want to buy your house, but I have a house to sell." And I'm like, "Well, I'll help you sell it," right? Like, I never even thought about it at the time. And sure enough, that's what we did. And over time, I think I realized, back then I was hearing, all the rumblings and all the things that were going on around us in the industry then. And finally, I decided someone said to me, and I, for the life of me, I can't remember who it was, suggested that, I get involved in the local association. And when I did, one of the things, just to share, some inner workings, was I was, frustrated with the transparency of the local association at the time. And it seemed to be a good old boys network of people, and we didn't know what was going on, right?
Mhm.
And so I took that to heart, and I wanted to get involved. And it was my mission to change that. Honestly, it really was. And I had a group of realtor friends that supported me, and we, that's where that happened. And then when we get through, I finally became president of SMAR in 2020, and I had some pretty good success at the local association, right? I felt really like I made some changes that were positive, and I felt like when I left there, I left it in a better place than when I got there, right? And so I said, well, let's see what's going on at Maryland Realtors and see if we can do the same thing. And I learned so much. I cannot stress enough the education you get when you start getting involved at the state. I mean, this isn't a sales pitch now, right? It's not. It's just reality. You learn so much. I learn every day.
It's
So
okay
I think that's my
okay
story.
to say, it's okay to
in a
pitch.
nutshell.
You can pitch it. It's
Yeah,
okay.
no, it is. I
We
get
need.
it. Yeah, I mean, I get it. It is. And it's funny because we're always needing people up here to do things in Annapolis, and because we do everything remotely now, and you can get involved. Honestly, I learned something. We had our exec committee meeting today, and I learned so much stuff just in that meeting this morning, right? So every time I'm up here, I learn something new, and that's value right there, honestly.
So then, so you joined committees at SMAR and then got on the board and became president. And while you were doing that, you were also here on committees, chairing committees. You chaired Ledge. At
I
least
didn't chair Ledge, never chaired Ledge.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay.
No.
But you were obviously involved. I think one of the messages that I'd like you to address what is service, volunteer service, coming into leadership roles, and the rest of your life. So how are you finding the balance now? You've been on from secretary, president-elect, and president, and so you know what the job is. You know what the commitment is like.
Right.
How are you finding it in relationship to your business, your home life, your personal life, vacations, everything else you're doing? How are you able to do it all?
So, and I will say this, interestingly enough, the commitment, this is, by the way, it's a really bad week to ask me about commitment. I feel like
it is crazy
right?
time for us, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. But I will say this, the commitment, honestly, became, especially from Maryland Realtors, was really, the meetings once a month, essentially, and anything that came about. I don't think up until the last year, I didn't notice any significant real change at all from my commitment of time here to my business or my personal life for that matter. However, it does get harder as you become president. But I'm going to point out something that I don't think people really always account for. And you know what? This is transparency, Chuck. So here you go.
Yep.
Last year, I had 2 referrals from agents that I had never met had I not been in Maryland Realtors. And so, I can directly attribute those 2 deals to agents across the state that I would have never met had I not been involved here. And that's a real tangible thing,
Sure. I mean, when we talk about investment of your time into leadership roles, and if any of I see people on here who have heard my bit about recruiting new leaders and what the return on the investment of your time is, I could be real honest with you. We don't lead with that.
No, I know, I get it.
We don't lead with
the
fact that you're going to grow your business because we want you here for the right reasons, of course, but we're not afraid of it. And we certainly don't shy away from it because we do say that the ability to, or the opportunity, I should say, to meet people from all around the state necessarily and create those relationships that you wouldn't have otherwise does have a tangible benefit, and the upside is business. And so, of course, we don't shy away from it. But about time management, what I hear a lot from people is, and I think a lot of us can relate to this. I do better. The busier I am, I think I do better. And because it requires you to focus and manage your time and kind of get rid of those distractions, the things you don't need that sort of take away time. Are you finding that? Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, I was going to say, I think my relationship with my calendar is better than it has ever been right now.
Describe your relationship with your calendar. I'm going to use that from now on.
No, it absolutely has. I mean, I've had the opportunity now, and you're time blocking things. I'm like, am I going to make it there in time? Do I need to set and and you look at your calendar first, right? I ironically have 2 screens on my computer at the office, and one of them, the calendar's always open up on. It's always just wide open, and that way I can look at it and see what I have happening. But I'll be remiss if I don't get back to the fact that the commitment of time really, I don't see that it's affected my business in a negative way or my personal life in any way. It's the same as, doing business every day, and it's part of if you make it part of your daily routine, if you will, then it's really irrelevant. I will say this also, I have a passion for, the advocacy part and that sort of thing, and being on legislative, it made me aware of changes in industry issues that made me better at my job.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's critically important, I think, by being informed and understanding what's happening across the state. And also, there's also a level of selfishness that says, hey, somebody else is going through the same thing I'm going through, with this deal or that deal. And that matters, right? It made me better at my job. And I truly believe that's the case when you volunteer here, for sure. And again, it is a sales pitchy. It sounds a little sales pitchy, but it's the truth, Yeah.
No, I think it's important. And I want that message to get out. We've been talking about this for years and years, and still there's some resistance when I call or when we talk to people and ask them if they've considered moving up and becoming more involved at the state level. That commitment, we can't shy away from it. I like to call it an investment, and like with any investment, you do expect a return on that investment. And I think we can begin or continue, I should say, to quantify that, and because there are tangible, measurable benefits that return on that investment of your time and expertise. So if you're listening out there and you are even thinking about becoming involved, please let us know. So if you do have a question, put it in the Q&A. I see a hand raised, but we're not going to be able to call on people. So if you do have a question, just drop it in the Q&A and we will get to it. Okay. So thank you. I think I was JC. So thanks a lot. Just put that in the Q&A. Let's move on to your initiatives. As we know, presidents come in, and there are some things.
Presidents come and go, Chuck. I heard it.
Presidents
come and go.
I did not say that. I think I might have started to say that, but I bit my tongue. I tell you a little secret that in AE world, and I tend not to try to say this out loud too often, but I think it's instructive because we appreciate that, and we know you want to make your mark, and that's great, and we want to facilitate that. So there's a little AE saying that goes something like, meet with the incoming president and say something along the lines of, tell me 5 things you'd like to accomplish next year, and I'll help you do 2 of them. So we have to always kind of put that in perspective in terms of how we know. I can tell you right now, this time a year from now, you're going to say, man, that year went awful fast, and that's just
I'm going to
consistent theme that we hear from outgoing presidents about how quickly it all went.
I'm going to tell you a little secret about incoming presidents and how, what we have found, and it's very interesting, is you buddy up to the president as president-elect, and as secretary, you buddy up to the president-elect. And then so you start to plant your seeds of your initiatives from day one.
You do. So
that you have the support of the the past president and the next president. And if without that, it's high, maybe you can get, well, with it, maybe you can get 3 of those 5 things done.
If you're really good.
Right.
So what does your year look like? What do you have planned? What's on your plate for us to really tackle in a meaningful way?
So we have, there's one thing that it's kind of transformed a little bit, right? Like, because I didn't want to come in here and say this, there's so many good things that happen here, and I didn't want to also sound like I'm, like there's a need to do anything radical, really, without sounding like I don't want to do anything. That's not the case. But I will tell you, it's interesting. One of the things that I've noticed, and I think I'm standing on this platform now, and it's kind of grown on me, is the relationship between the local association and the member and the state association. And I think that we, and you're going to talk about that a little bit, I'm sure, and like some of the value proposition, if you will, of what Maryland Realtors has, that I don't think anyone or many people know all that comes from Maryland Realtors. Yeah. And I want us to build that relationship and make it even stronger so that we're united with the local associations, and I hear it going to these installations every day now, because they have challenges with these things and challenges with those things. I had a conversation with Mike Graziano at Prince George's the other day about they're having a challenge with permitting that they're facing. And I just wanted him to know, I was like, look, we've got your back. You tell me what we need to do, and we're going to figure it out together, and we'll support you. And I think that's important to know, especially on that side. But that's another important facet of my initiatives, and that is to just continue to support the advocacy efforts that we have here, and honestly strengthen them a little bit as well. I said in my installation speech, and I'm kind of sticking with this, is, I don't think people realize the magnitude of the 30,000 members we have in Maryland Realtors. We have a voice. And if we stick together and unite together on our issues, it's going to be hard for Annapolis to not hear us. And I want to make sure that we stand up and we fight for those things instead of just accepting them the way they are. It's not status quo anymore. We've got, housing issues here that are a crisis, we are not in, this is not just a normal passing thing right now. We all know that. Anybody who is a practitioner right now knows that this is different. And we need to stand up and fight for housing issues stronger than ever. There's that missing middle. I'm going back to our phrase. There's so many people that are not able to purchase a home right now, and we need to fight for them, because it's part of our business too. Let's say it's not being just, there's a little bit of selfishness in it, but we have to do that. So fighting for those issues is another big key thing, initiative of mine. Excuse me. And I think lastly, I'm going to put the third one out there, Chuck, because it's really, they all tie together to some degree. One of the things that I had heard over the years, and it's really grown on me, is a financial literacy component in the state of Maryland. And what I mean by that is, and I said this a little bit yesterday, I was at Garrett County's installation yesterday, and I mentioned that my children are both adults. They are, I hate to put this out there like this, but they are very privileged to have had me as a parent. And there are not all children that come out of high schools here in Maryland have those same types of privileges. And a lot of that can be remedied with simple education. It can be fixed and can change the lives of thousands if students graduating from high school are aware of how to manage money, how to manage real estate, how to protect. Do you know how many young adults have no clue about buying a home? Their generations have never purchased a home, never in their lives. And we have to, I think we are responsible to make that change. And so I think we're going to be fighting in Annapolis for some key changes. NAR has a program as well, Ignite Others with the putting a real estate agent in every high school by 2024, I think, right? The end of 2024 or something, or June. Excuse me. And I'm excited about that one, right? Because I feel like there's a legacy for me there. If we change something, it could affect lots of youth 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
So that's a lot. Let's unpack kind of one at a time. Continue on with financial literacy, though, because this goes back a ways. The first time I was really kind of introduced to it was one of Eileen Kessler's initiatives all those years ago. And of course, there's two things going on. First of all, it's in high schools in a way in Maryland. It's not a statewide graduation requirement. Let's be real clear about that. And right. I don't know that we've completely landed on that as the gold standard, if you will. And clearly that's been on people's minds because there are coalitions out there. And so let's be clear, we're not going to reinvent the wheel on this, right? We're going to be
not at all.
With
right.
organizations, the bankers, CFPB, there's a great MCEE out of Towson University. Then we will be partnering with these organizations to develop curriculums, but especially to make sure that the home buying and selling process is part of that curriculum. Most jurisdictions offer some of that
right.
within the context of other classes. And so it's not a standalone graduation requirement in every high school. Clearly, that's a goal. And also, as clearly, and probably doesn't need to be said, but local boards of education are opposed to state mandating what has to go into the graduation requirements. We know that, and we have history with that. That doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying for that. But at the very least, we are going to make our voices heard in terms of what we think should be, if not mandated, then what's included and how to make that easier to access. Because I think that's part of the problem, is it's not really easy to access, partly because there's nobody that understands it well enough to teach it. So I know there's some real problems as far as rolling this out, but I don't think any of them are insurmountable. And I really like the idea of getting a realtor in every high school because we can help teach that piece of it. So at least that
Absolutely, we
class,
can.
if they do, even if it's an elective and they take that class, that maybe we can help teach the class. Brenda has, Brenda Small, that is, thank you, Brenda. There's the toolkit. Thank you so much. And so, yeah, that's available for people. And we are going to be leveraging NAR's resources. And how great was that? We were in Leadership Summit in August.
Yeah, I know.
And the incoming president of NAR says, this is one of her big initiatives. And here we are saying, ours too. So that was a really nice, dovetail. So we're going to be leveraging everything that's out there already, and then working with our partners and coalition partners. And we're going to be everywhere. If there's an event, whether it's public, whether it's for high school students, no matter what it is, we're going to be partnering. We're going to be sponsors. We're going to have a presence, and we're going to be there spreading the word, not just for financial literacy, but home ownership as one of the tools of wealth accumulation. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I want to rewind one little bit on that, something that I'm still stunned that it is not a requirement to graduate high school in the state of Maryland. And with a financial literacy course of some sort, right?
Yeah.
It's not a requirement in the state. I think
Right.
that's a simple, it would be nice to poll the local, boards of education and see who does require it in their locals, right? Who does include it in their graduation requirements. And we may be talking about a small number, I don't know, but I don't think so.
I'm not sure there's any right now, to be honest. Don't quote me on
Yeah.
that. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
I know
There is another
Frederick
hand
County is
raised.
working on some stuff.
Yeah, so please put it in the Q&A. We're not able to take questions from the attendees at this time. So please if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. So that financial literacy, you mentioned RPAC, you mentioned, our advocacy. So how, I love this vision, and it's something that we've talked about for several years now, and I'm really excited to see it come to fruition. Tell me your vision for marrying or I guess dovetailing our advocacy efforts, the voting records of members of the General Assembly, and how they get RPAC contributions. What's your vision for that?
That's a delicate conversation. However, it's not. And what I mean by that is, number one is, if you don't, let me start from the beginning, right? If Maryland Realtors is proposing something to the General Assembly in a bill of some sort or some sort of thing, we've taken a lot of time and effort and energy. We're not doing it for our own health necessarily. We're doing it for the industry as a whole, including consumers, right? Like, our realtors look out for consumers, period. That's our job, really. And what I want to say is, when we go to Annapolis with that, and we have members of the House of Delegates or our senators who receive money from our RPAC contributions and continuously fail to support our initiatives, to me, we need a scorecard that tells us that. My vision would be, if you're not supporting us, why are we giving you money? And I think that's the way it should be. And we've had, on the local level, we had a lot of conversations about this, right? Why should I give you money if you're not going to help our visions and work with us? And we want a seat at the table. We're not asking for you to agree with us on everything, but we definitely want a seat at the table. And if you're not going to give that to us, or continuously do not give it to us, or go behind our back after you think you're giving it to us, but then you know what? We need to harmonize. That's a great word. I think we've talked about. We need to harmonize our contributions to those members with their voting records for our initiatives. And I truly believe that. I don't want to give you money if you're not going to help support us. It just doesn't make sense.
We haven't really tried that yet, have we? On that scale. Could be
I mean,
kind
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the legalities of it, Chuck, so I don't want to, step on my own toes here. But the truth is, I don't want to give you money if you're not supporting us, period. Like, that doesn't make sense. If you continuously tell us or don't tell us, or you continuously don't support us, why would we continuously support you? It just doesn't make sense. And my vision would be for us to just, look at those scorecards. And I don't care if we go back to them and say, hey, wait a minute, buddy. You didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, and we gave you this. Something's wrong. And I'm not trying to suggest we buy votes or anything like that, okay? But, support is aligned with, support.
So Lisa May's head is spinning right now, but I think
I know it is. I'm sorry. Sorry, Lisa.
I'm just going to say,
next door too.
I'm just going to say, it's more nuanced than that. I mean, ideally, that's your
I get it.
pitch, right? We support you if you support us. That's the elevator pitch. There are a lot of reasons to support candidates, and one of which is their support. Sometimes
I'm surprised this door didn't fly open, because I know Lisa's next door.
Yeah, she's right next door. That's right. She maybe put something. Yeah, don't post anything, Lisa. Okay, okay.
I know.
Thank you.
That's good.
But cultivating members is also a one way. It's one way to cultivate them, right? To say,
yes.
You haven't been great. Here's a little, here's a little money. This could double next time if you do even better. And so there are a lot of different messages we can send with our PAC contributions, and of course we have independent expenditures. But even in a lot of delegate races, the $6,000 is meaningful. On the statewide level, or certainly the national level. The PAC contribution limits tend to not have the same impact today that they did before the Supreme Court cases it's lost in my head. But sure, there are a lot of ways to do that, and I think the message is next year you'll be meeting with our PAC, because this could be news to them. Carol, I'm looking at you, Carol, before that this is coming. and hoping...
I keep looking at my phone, waiting for
all
the messages to come in.
And I'm pretty sure there's some other trustees on the webinar, but so we're certainly going to be rolling this out, and this is going to be a partnership, obviously, with our PAC, who's going to have a lot of perspective, and because there's a lot of nuance to it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So an anonymous attendee asked a very good question that we will be getting to in a couple of minutes. So stay tuned for that. Yes. Thank you all for questions about membership, the NAR stuff, what's going on, realtors in the
We're getting there
right now. We're going to end with that. So we're going to leave a good 20-25 minutes to address that and to take your questions. So thank you, Anonymous, and John Rice. Thank you. We will be getting to those issues right after we talk to dovetail on the issue of RPAC and records and legislative. Let's just pick the one I think is probably our signature initiative this year, and that's the legislation dealing with the buyer representation agreement. What are we hoping to achieve with that?
Yeah, I think it's funny. That really does dovetail into the NAR conversation. I think significantly so. So the legislation, if you want to brief everybody on exactly how it works, because I want to make sure I don't.
Yeah, that's fair. What we notice, and everybody knows this, if you're on the webinar, you've self-selected. So this is obviously a group, many of whom is probably not needed to get this message, but
Right,
we're going
right.
to continue to put it out there. Everybody knows that in the Real Estate Brokers Act, there is a section that tells you what's supposed to be in every brokerage agreement. And there are specific provisions that apply to the buyer representation agreement. And one of those is the amount of compensation expressed as a percent of sale price, a flat dollar amount, or a combination of the two. That's your commission. That's what your compensation is for representing the buyer in the transaction, regardless of who's paying that compensation, right? So as a standalone matter, the buyer representation agreement must include a field in that blank for compensation. And it has to be filled out in a way that meets the standards for a meeting of the minds so that there's an actual contract form. We know, then it says, maybe I will receive some or all of this compensation from another source, i.e. the listing broker. And that's the way we've operated. And that's the way this marketplace has operated since the advent of buyer agency in 1999. We also know that we really stink at doing that, that we are not doing it well to this day. Many of our members, and we get it. And just not to belittle anybody or cast aspersions, we get it. It's complicated. Consumers don't really understand it. A lot of us still have struggles with explaining the compensation model in real estate today, that I represent you, but I get paid by the guy on the other side. You know, the broker on the other side pays me, and that doesn't make sense to a lot of consumers. And so we end up taking shortcuts, like leaving it blank or putting per MLS or all these other kind of shorthand ways that we just don't want to, because we struggle to have that conversation with buyers. Now it's going to be more and more important that we figure out a way to describe in terms that buyers understand how compensation works. And because there's going to continue to be differences, there's going to be listings where the listing broker is offering compensation, and then there will be some where they are not. There will always be situations where the compensation in the MLS, it differs from what's in your buyer representation agreement. That's another aspect of the conversation you're going to have with buyers about what happens if there's a difference between those two numbers. We will be sponsoring legislation, or we will be advocating for legislation to clarify right within the Brokers Act what all those elements are in a way that makes it easier for people to understand. And consequently, you know, if assuming the bill passes this time next year, there will be a new buyer brokerage agreement that has all of those things in there. We might push for a shorter, an effective date that is sooner. That bill could be effective as opposed to October 1st. Maybe we could get an effective date that's before October 1st of 2024, but that's a separate issue. The point is that once that bill passes, and we're optimistic that we can get that bill passed, we will be putting out an enormous amount of educational materials about this. There will be a media information blitz about how we should be having, what kind of conversation and how that conversation could go with buyers regarding compensation models and the difference between houses for which the broker is not offering compensation and those for which the listing broker is, how our relationship works with the different compensations, our responsibilities to the buyer. The buyer wants that house and wants to see that house. How do we communicate to the buyer the differences between that model, a compensation, and zero or dollar or whatever, and whatever other compensation the listing broker might be offering. So that's going to happen. It should be happening now. We just can't because the Brokers Act is what it is. But we're always going to be looking at ways to improve the forms and then educational materials to help have that conversation, because this industry, that's a conversation we have to have. And our agents and our members have to have not only that, but what constraints on them to properly communicate to buyers how to, for example, if the broker's not offering compensation,
Right.
what the buyer's options are and what the limits of our involvement per the code of ethics are relationship to how to or whether to incorporate something in the offer to purchase about making a change to the offer of compensation in the MLS. Now, broker to broker, that conversation can always happen, but the code of ethics, be real clear about this, prohibits realtors from using the offer to change the compensation. Doesn't prohibit the buyer from doing it. And that's the kind of conversation, we're splitting hairs to a certain extent, but that's the conversation on the training that we're all going to have to get comfortable with. And we know we're not right now. That's the big challenge I see, because we're not comfortable with that conversation because it's complicated. Buyers don't necessarily want to hear it, and we take the path of least resistance. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that's where we get back. There's a consumer piece to this, and there's a member piece to this, right? There's exactly. Definitely both in a broker piece. Actually, there's a brokerage piece as well. And sure. I'm gonna throw a bone in here about a positive spin. Like, I am confident that the staff here is, they're so effective, especially on the form side of getting things out there and providing information as quickly as possible. So I feel pretty strong that would be the case. I feel like we'd be able to provide good information very quickly to our members. And a lot of this, so this transitions into the reasoning or the rationale for the importance of this kind of thing. Not only, let me first start by saying Maryland, we said this morning in exec committee. I truly believe that Maryland is above the national average when it comes to these things. And we're ahead of the curve, right? That doesn't mean we don't need to push harder and stay further ahead of the curve. And these lawsuits at NAR are directly associated with this issue, right? Like, I mean, that's what, and I don't want to think, I tend to not think, Chuck, I know that they are pushing us towards these sorts of things, but I feel like we were working on this before the lawsuits were even of a concern. So I feel like they just help us see the clarity of how important it is for us to have the transparency with the consumer about our commissions. Look, I always say this, I've said it for a long time, I'm worth what I get paid. Especially as a volunteer leader, I know I'm worth every penny of what I get paid. But as a professional, I'm very transparent with my consumers with my buyers and sellers about commission, and it's all in the buyer brokerage agreement, and it's all in the listing agreement. And I want to make sure that, we need to make sure that that's clear for everybody, every member across the state too, and every consumer.
I got a message that we froze and at least one person was having trouble getting back in.
Oh, no.
Is that a universal issue or just one person's issue? Well, I've just got a question from Louise, so I guess everybody else is okay. So it must be just that one person, and hopefully she can get back in. So we have a couple, 3 questions actually, very, very good questions, exactly on point. So the first is, and it came up in class. Of course, it's going to come up. Of course it is. Mm-hmm. What is Maryland Realtors' position on not joining NAR?
Well, Chuck, that's really your question. Actually.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Well, no, it really is. If you think about it, what I mean? It really is. So
yeah, it really is. It's inside. It's kind of inside baseball, to a certain extent. Excuse me. So let me answer. Excuse me. Let me take a sip first, and then I'll answer. So the answer is pretty simple. NAR's dues formula states that according to the charters that we all have issued from the National Association, you join one, you join them all. There is no opportunity in either the NAR's Constitution and bylaws, Maryland Realtors Constitution and bylaws, the bylaws of any local association in the country, frankly, for there to be an ability to join just one or just two, but not all three associations. As of today, that is not an option. So when the dues bill comes, there are two options: pay it or don't pay it in full. There's no Xing out dues to one level of association versus another. That's just not an option as of today. Now, that lawsuit is wrapping up its first week, and who knows what the future holds. But as of today, the dues bill does not give you the opportunity, nor will it this year, as far as I know, unless there's a last minute settlement. And so I'm not predicting the future, but as of today, that dues bill, that is a single amount, and it's dues for all three associations. And that's the way it's going to be until we hear otherwise. So,
well, I had a conversation recently about this, and one of the things I'm not going to, I don't want to get into defending NAR and all that. I don't want to put that out there in any way, because, I think people who heard they know my opinion already, I think. But I will say this, the portion of your dues that goes to NAR, the national advocacy that you get up there is quite, in my humble opinion, is quite honestly worth the dues for the national portion. Personally, that's just me, and obviously I'm president of Maryland Realtors. You would think I have to say that, but the truth is, I think just the advocacy portion from NAR is worth $150 a year that you pay on the portion of your dues. Again, it's transparency. Remember, those dues are broken up by three parts usually, and I think again, it's also about value. What are you getting for your money, right? And so I hope people really do consider that.
Yeah, so that's John Rice's question. What's our vision with realtors and still, we hope and we believe and want to see continue realtors at the center of the transaction. And how do we, you mentioned it before, how do we show that to our members, number one, and that's the value proposition that we can talk a little bit more about. And how do we show that value to consumers? So it's a kind of a two-pronged approach, right?
Yeah, I think, I said this before, and I'm really not beating up more on NAR, but, I think there's been a failed, we've had lots of marketing campaigns throughout the years. And I think they've actually done a poor job of articulating value, not only to the consumer, the strength of the code of ethics and the things that we have from NAR, the consumer probably doesn't know as much as they should in that regard. And hopefully our realtor members do. And we have to toot our own horn to some degree, right? We have to explain to people that, we are supposed to be the cream of the crop, the realtor, the brand, right? And if you don't put that out there, the consumer isn't going to know necessarily, right? I just think we need to, and again, the campaigns that NAR has spent millions of dollars on just haven't really accomplished that, in my opinion. I think it boils down to the local realtor.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, but I really do think the consumer piece might be more important in some respects.
Yeah.
Than the member piece, because I'm confident in our value proposition. When we look at what you get for your dues dollars from Maryland Realtors, I will defend that until the cows come home, because I think membership is that our value proposition is chock full of stuff that helps people, our members in their businesses. So I think.
Well, Chuck, I'm going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to interrupt you. I think that's important, because what people don't realize is that I don't know that our members all see it. What you just said, I'm not sure that the members see that. And so we have to do, the consumer doesn't know about Maryland Realtors really at all. Let's be real. They don't.
We are. We're being real.
But right, exactly. the key is our members need to understand the value that Maryland Realtors brings to them. And we're doing some really cool things in the next, few months to put it out there for people to see and hear what Maryland Realtors brings to you for value. And I think that's so important right now. And I didn't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. You know me, I'm just jump in, right? But
No,
I
you
just
have
think
to.
we have
Sometimes everybody out there knows sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah.
What consideration, oh my goodness, circumstances that BB, I guess that means buyer brokerage agreements, are not allowed and no compensation in the MLS. Well, if that happens, and we have just lost 50 years of progress. Because if we go back to a marketplace where a home buyer has to visit every brokerage website for information on listings, and we're not even sharing, so we're not even cooperating, because let's be clear, cooperation and compensation are two different things, right? We can have cooperation, which is simply sharing information about our listings. That's cooperation. There is no, as far as I know, and I hope there isn't, conversation about stopping cooperation. Because without the marketplace, without a place for consumers to go to find information about homes for sale, without resorting to going to 300 brokers' websites to see what listings they have, or drive around neighborhoods and hope there's a sign up on a property that hasn't already been put under contract, and buyers call only listing agents to get that information, and because they're unrepresented, we have lost 50 years of progress. And that's Armageddon to me. I mean, why did we just live through these years of progress of getting buyer representation only to see it evaporate? That would be very, very sad and detrimental to consumers when they go to listing brokers. And I got to tell you, I saw, I won't name any names. I saw a YouTube video by a listing agent. You're right, Sherry, that would be a disservice to consumers. That's exactly right. I saw a video piece from a member. He was touring a house that he had listed, and he said to the camera, there is only one way you will ever even know this house is for sale, and that's to call me, because it's my listing.
Wow. And
the only way you're ever going to get into the see houses like this is to call listing agents. You are not going to get to even have access to homes if you have a buyer's agent, because they're not going to know this house is even for sale, because I have the listing, it's not going in the MLS, and I have the buyers. And if you want to get into this house, you have to call me. And that's my biggest fear, that those closed networks end up taking precedence over our current system, which we know, I mean, even intuitively, right? We know that the broadest exposure a property has to the largest potential pool of buyers, almost by definition, has to result in greater service to the seller, of course, number one, but also to prospective buyers. And I understand the arguments, I do, but we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I mean, why would we abandon that model when it works to consumers' benefit? And I think that NAR is really focusing on that message, that this is a benefit to consumers. This is not a benefit just to us. This benefits consumers.
Well, not to mention the fair housing implications, right?
Well, yeah, there's all that.
I mean, there's that, I mean, and that's, there is that, and that's a serious issue when you restrict viewings of properties to certain groups of people. That's a fair housing violation. I mean, so there's so much stuff here to unpack.
There is, and we just scratched the surface.
I know. I want to. I know we got other things to cover, but I want to say,
Actually, we only have a couple of minutes, Chris. You can actually start to
Okay,
wrap it up if
perfect.
there are no other questions.
Well, I mean, that's perfect because I wanted to say, these conversations are, Chuck and I talked yesterday and we had our exec committee meeting and we made it a standing topic of conversation for the next several months, at least until we figure out what's going on here. And Maryland Realtors, honestly, I know Chuck will agree with this, is our mission is to be on the forefront of it, and any changes that need to take place or anything that we need to do differently and or inform you of, I can promise you that Maryland Realtors will be doing that expeditiously, and we'll have it done as quickly as we can, and we'll get answers for those questions as soon as we have them for you. I truly do want to commit to that.
And me as well. Our entire team, our communications team, our advocacy team, our legal team, our member engagement team, we are all working together to make sure that you have the best information as soon as possible, and not just the information, but how it's gonna, what are the impacts of those changes on you, and how are you going to do business in these new environments, in these very, very uncertain and ever-changing times. We hope that again is part of the value of membership. So yeah, we are definitely committed to that. Thank you.
For sure.
Maybe a minute or two for any last questions. Courtney Murphy's had your hand up, but if you have a question, you could just put it in the Q&A. That would be great. You've had your hand up for a while. We really can't have you speak or anything, but if you do have a question, oh, it just went down. Okay. Any other final questions, final thoughts, anything? Thank you, everybody, with the exception of maybe one or two people, stayed the whole hour. So we really do appreciate your time. Oh, there is a question. When are rates coming down? Yeah, thanks, John. Hey, man, wait a minute. My crystal ball says, oh, my 8-ball. Remember the 8-ball?
The 8-ball, the magic 8-ball.
One of those answer not clear at this time or something, or one was ask again later. Remember that one? Ask
right.
Later. So John, ask again later. Obviously we don't,
sure.
I'll tell you what, look, now they're talking about soft landing, right? So if you go, this is part of my bit, and I'm sorry, but you got to listen to these economists who said we were going to be in a deep recession by now. And the economy has really shown such resilience that economists have no idea where we're going. They just don't. The Fed doesn't know. Unemployment keeps, hiring keeps steady. Consumer spending is continued to be robust. They're expecting a pretty robust holiday spending season. Consumers are spending. The job market is resilient. Wages keep going up. Inflation is coming down. There are so many positive signs, and so much conventional wisdom doesn't hold anymore, except a huge exception to that. The law of supply and demand is alive and well. And that's why we're in this housing crisis, right? So all the other things about the economy, nobody really knows, but the law of supply and demand is alive and well, and we're feeling the effects of it now. Rates are, I saw that dreaded 8 number today about pushing, and who knows? I wish we knew. I think some signs are there that rates could moderate, but we just don't know. There's too many unknowns, especially given the geopolitical situations that we're facing now. Who knows what oil prices are going to do? We could see inflation again. We just don't know. There's too many unknowns. So yeah, I wish
all the economists have said every one of them has had a different stance throughout the past year.
Remember that?
Have you noticed there's been flip-flopping all year long, the last 18 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just, one says it and then they'll come back and say the exact opposite 6 months later.
Right. And we're not keeping score on them. We should be keeping score on Larry Summers, how many times he's changed his tune. And then I just saw soft landing. I saw that again, a bad headline just for the first time in months. Soft landing. Yeah, maybe. So who knows? Chris,
Well,
wonderful time. Thank you. I hope people
no,
out
thank
there
you.
sticking with us. Hope you found that helpful, and reach out. We are always here. You know how to reach us, and we will continue to update everybody. And as soon as we know something, you'll know something.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. I mean, I wanted to also say, we're going to be doing these, we're going to have regular updates as well anyway. I think we're trying to do something for where we can get something out, once a month or so, and kind of just let you guys know that I'm here, still sitting, still doing my job.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. Okay. Kelly, any last words of
Nope, we will send this recorded webinar out to all registrants, and along with that link that went to NAR's housing,
Right.
the literacy link to sign up for that. But we will be keeping you informed with all the webinars coming up. Thank you,
this will
Chuck.
be on the YouTube channel as well. And when's the next webinar?
Yeah.
Next webinar is November 2nd, and that is our GRI importance webinar.
Terrific. Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and we will see you soon.
All right, take care.
Thank you. See you guys.